Morning, everyone. Welcome to our Magic Morning. My name's Lindsay McDonald. I am the Chief Executive of Magic Breakfast and delighted to welcome you to today's Magic Morning. I think it will be a very interesting one, I hope, for everyone. Just a couple of housekeeping items. If you would like to use the live captions, those are enabled and you just need to select at the bottom of your screen, show captions. I always say that I'm conscious that sometimes I don't think the AI quite picks up on all of the Canadian accent points that I make, but hopefully it picks up the gist of it overall. There will be a recording of the Magic Morning shared to YouTube as well on our channel. So if any of your colleagues aren't able to make it, or if you need to duck out partway through and want to watch it through to the end, then rest assured you'll be able to. And also we always submit a kind of survey feedback opportunity at the end, and we really appreciate and welcome your feedback. We're constantly looking to improve and develop these Magic Mornings and also make sure that the topics we cover are interesting to our audience. As we move through, I'm going to introduce our wonderful speakers in a moment, but just to prompt you to start thinking, get your thinking hats on. Hopefully you've all had a good, healthy breakfast to fuel your mind. Please do submit questions as we go into the Q&A section. Again, if you go to the bottom of the screen, you can see the Q&A panel and you'll be able to add in questions. At the end of all of the presentations, I'll then bring all of our speakers back on screen and we'll be able to pick those up for you. So the speakers we have today are Lorraine Kelly, who is our Policy and Public Affairs Manager here at Magic Breakfast. We have Jill McLuckie, who is part of our Service Delivery team, Area Manager for Scotland. And then we're also delighted to welcome Anthony Blake and Jill Dodd, Assistant Head Teacher and Head Teacher at Sandhill View Academy in Sunderland, one of Magic Breakfast's brilliant partner schools. And today we are going to share with you a bit of insight as to what we understand at the moment of the new government's commitment to school breakfast policy. But importantly, and I think this is really the key role for Magic Breakfast, is to shine a light on the children and the young people that this policy doesn't support. So I am just coming back from the last of 4 party conferences that we attended as Magic Breakfast, the SNP, the Liberal Democrats, Labour, and then this week the Conservatives. And we have been highlighting and championing not just the implementation of good policy and the Children's Wellbeing Bill, which Lorraine will give us more insight to, and some of the work that we did at the Labour Party conference, but also making sure that the opposition benches understand the evidence, the expertise, and the need that Magic Breakfast has and will continue to highlight and stand up for hungry children and young people across the UK. So without further ado, I am delighted to welcome on screen Lorraine Kelly, who is going to talk you through some of the exciting developments and the opportunities ahead.
Hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. As Lindsay said, I'm Lorraine, and I am just going to spend the next 10 minutes talking you through the upcoming changes in government policy and legislation in England, the advocacy work our partners like you have supported us with, what the new government changes means for children and young people, and crucially and most urgently, as Lindsay said, who will be left behind as it stands, and what we need your help with in the coming months and years to support all those children and young people left out. I've got my first slide up, thank you. So, as many of you will know, currently in England, there is a national school breakfast programme that provides school breakfasts to around 700 schools with high levels of deprivation across England. This programme was established by the former Conservative government, but is due to come to an end in July next year. The great news is that the new Labour government has committed to rolling out universal school breakfast clubs in all primary schools in England. Going even further, this will be embedded into legislation once the Children's Wellbeing Bill is passed next year, which means all primary schools will have a statutory obligation to have a breakfast club in them going forward. The government is also piloting breakfast provision in 750 schools from April next year, and from September, the national rollout should begin. Around 17,000 primary schools will be reached through this change. This will be the most far-reaching, sustainable government programme to tackle child morning hunger in schools with breakfast that has ever been implemented in England. This is, of course, a huge deal, and we at Magic Breakfast are just thrilled that it's happening. We have been part of the movement to make this happen, and that is in huge thanks to a lot of our supporters here today on the call. I want to, first of all, just share a few examples of how funding and corporate support from you all has enabled our policy and engagement team to influence this positive change. Can I get the second slide, please? In a couple of examples are in 2023, one of our partners, Zurich Community Trust, undertook extensive work to provide a robust costing model for us, which allowed us to calculate how much any given breakfast policy would cost a government. We shared this with the Labour Party around 18 months ago, and this, to our understanding, has informed the funds that they have now allocated to their new breakfast commitment. In other words, work that our supporters like you have conducted with us has enabled the new government to determine if they can afford to roll out breakfasts across the country or not. And of course, in this case, they have decided that they can. In another example, research undertaken by Pro Bono Economics and sponsored by our corporate partner Kraft Heinz found that for every £1 invested in school breakfast, £50 would be generated in future economic returns from the government. This statistic alone opened up doors that we couldn't have dreamed of opening a couple of years before, including conversations with the former Treasury team. I have so many more examples that I can't get through on this call of how support from partners like you has helped us to ensure the new breakfast commitment comes into play, along with all our other stakeholders and sector stakeholder partners over the years. How our What's for Breakfast research, sponsored by the People's Postcode Lottery, enabled us to collect and share the stories of those experiencing morning hunger with politicians. How your support helped us secure meetings with the likes of Sir Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff, Sue Gray, someone other charities might only dream of being able to speak to about their issue. Or how your support has helped us to get to a position of influence, wherein the Cabinet Secretary of Education, Bridget Phillipson, has not just visited a Magic Breakfast school once this year, but twice, so that she could understand the effectiveness of our approach. This is all to say that your support has been invaluable for us and our influencing work, and it is a big part of why we are all at this pivotal moment, a moment where millions more children and young people are about to have access to a school breakfast each morning. Can we move to slide 3, please? But of course, that's only part of the reason I'm speaking at this Magic Morning today. The other reason is to lay out the work that still needs to be done, and urgently, and why we still need your support for years to come. You will have noticed so far, I have only mentioned primary schools. This is because children with special educational needs and disabilities in schools outside of mainstream primary schools are not included in this new policy or legislation yet. What's more, secondary pupils are also not included. You'll have also noticed that I've only mentioned breakfast clubs. Magic Breakfast's more than 20 years of experience working with schools knows for certain that clubs are just not enough to reach children at risk of hunger. So, what does this mean? Well, it means that even with the new government promise, millions of children and young people will still be left out and won't be able to access breakfast. I just want to let that settle in for a moment. Even after the most widespread government breakfast commitment to date in England comes into force next year, millions of children and young people will still not have access to breakfast in schools, meaning children and young people up and down the country will still be too hungry to learn. Can I get the next slide, please? So what I'm really trying to say is we still have a lot of work to do together. Immediately and most urgently, we need to keep providing breakfasts to children and young people before this policy comes into effect over the next 12 months. From an advocacy point of view, over this same period, we need to ensure that the new policy and legislation is implemented and passed in a way that ensures all children at risk of hunger are truly reached. This really means 4 things, and these things are really important. The first is we need to convince decision makers to go beyond just breakfast clubs to include mixed models such as classroom provision and grab and go breakfasts. It means we need to ensure all schools have expert support and advice in this policy so that they can embed school breakfasts within their schools and communities in the most effective ways. Thirdly, it means going beyond just primary schools and including all children with special educational needs and disabilities. We know that they experience some of the highest levels of disadvantage in society, and no policy aimed at tackling child poverty should ever exclude these children. And finally, it means that the impact is measured and monitored effectively in a way that ensures children at risk of hunger are truly being reached. This is our key work over the next 12 months to ensure the government's policy and legislation is effective, and your support will help us ensure this policy is right. But as I said, there are many children who will still not have access to a breakfast even when this policy is rolled out. Can I get the next slide, please? This is because secondary school pupils are currently excluded from the policy. Yet we all know that hunger doesn't stop at the age of 11. There are currently 3,500 secondary schools in England, approximately 3.7 million young people, and over 1 million of these are at risk of morning hunger. The National School Breakfast Programme just reaches a handful of them right now, and even so, it will end in July next year. That means 1 million children are at risk of hunger will continue being at risk of hunger once this new policy and legislation comes into place. We will continue to support as many secondary schools as we can through our own breakfast provision whilst they are excluded. But over the coming years, we will need to work tirelessly to put pressure on the government to include these children and young people in their policy so that no child, no matter their age, begins the school day too hungry to learn. And of course, we are going to really need your help and support to do this. Can I get my final slide, please? And finally, whilst we work to end child morning hunger in primary, and secondary schools in England, we also know that hunger doesn't just stop in England. Magic Breakfast also works with schools in Scotland. The Scottish National Party, the current party in government, promised in its 2021 manifesto that it would roll out school breakfasts in all primary and special schools and fund pilot provision in a number of secondary schools. This was a direct result of Magic Breakfast's advocacy work, sponsored by supporters like those of you here today, and their promise was made in line with our language, our specific asks, and our costings. At the time, it really did feel like a true victory. However, not a single breakfast has been offered to a child or young person through this promise, made 3.5 years ago today, and breakfast has been glaringly absent in every programme for government and budget announcement in Scotland ever since. I'm really sharing this with you for two reasons, as well as to set up the context for the next presentation by Jill. Firstly, it is to say that even when promises and commitments are made by governments, it is our role and our duty to keep influencing, advocating, and pushing for these promises to become a reality. Sometimes they are just empty words, and it is our responsibility to ensure they become action. Secondly, it is to say that our mission has a very long way to go, and we need your help and support in getting there. Not only do we have to ensure the Labour government get their current commitment right and convince them to roll out breakfasts to all children with SEND as well, over the coming years, we also need to influence them to reach all secondary schools with breakfasts, and we need to go beyond England and push the Scottish Government to begin rolling out breakfasts to all the children and young people it made its promise to. We won't stop our work until every child in the UK has access to a school breakfast. We will continue to work with schools now and in the future to provide breakfast to pupils left out of government policies, and we will continue to advocate and call for change so that every single child is reached. Your support here has enabled us to get to this pivotal position, and your support will continue to be critical in helping us reach every single child, every single morning, with a school breakfast going forward for years to come. Thank you so much for all that you do for children and young people, and thank you for listening. Now I'm going to hand back over to Lindsay.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. And you rightly highlight not just what we still have to do, but also what we've collectively achieved together. And I think what we also really wanted to ensure is that we shine a light on not just every child and young person, but also the different contexts and countries. So with that, I'm now going to introduce Jill McLuckie, who is Area Manager for Scotland, and give us a bit of context around what's happening and what still needs to take place in Scotland.
Thank you, Lindsay. Can I have my first slide, please, Susanna? Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you here this morning. I would love to give you a little taste of what's happening north of the border in Scotland within our Magic Breakfast schools. I'm going to take the next 10 minutes just to share with you a little bit about my job role and the work of our community engagement team, then discuss, as Lorraine had said, the Scottish Government's unfulfilled promise to deliver breakfast to our young Scots and the effect of poverty that we're seeing within our schools in Scotland. Firstly, I'd like to tell you about all the wonderful work that's been happening in our new schools and how they have used breakfast to support their young people. Currently in Scotland, we support 75 schools. That is a mix of primary, secondary and ASN schools, which in England is special educational needs. We work over 14 local authorities, and this is growing rapidly. We have a long list of schools who would benefit from Magic Breakfast support. During September, we served 148,200 portions of breakfast in our schools, which I think you'll agree is absolutely incredible. We have a lot of hungry children up here. My role of area manager is to lead our community engagement team. We work directly with schools to help implement a hunger-focused breakfast without any barriers to participation and stigma. We build trusting relationships with the schools to build up a real picture of what's happening in their school communities, the challenges they face, and how best to support them. There's not a one-size-fits-all for any school. We offer a bespoke system where we find a solution for maximum impact so that we're reaching as many children and young people at risk of morning hunger. There are many different types of breakfast models that schools can choose from classroom, playground bagels, nurture, grab and go. I've seen breakfast this year in libraries, techie brekkies, breakfast in a blether within the classrooms. Schools are getting more creative than ever in capturing children at risk of hunger. This coming year, we'll be raising awareness within community engagement, helping to educate and empower the whole school community on the importance of breakfast. We'll be delivering staff briefings, assemblies, and engaging with families to ensure that every single child and young person, no matter what their circumstances, has access to a filling, nutritious breakfast each morning so that they are prepared for the day ahead, they're learning, and they're able to reach their full potential. Please, can I have the next slide? As Lorraine discussed previously, the failure of the Scottish Government to deliver on their breakfast promise so far means that young Scots are being let down. We urgently need action to address the deep-rooted issues of morning hunger. Many children do not have sufficient food to eat, and their basic needs just aren't being met at all. Providing a school breakfast would help ease financial pressure for so many families and ensure that the children were ready to learn. We all know that a nutritious breakfast improves cognitive function, attendance, and behaviour in class, and overall health and well-being. Failure to roll out school breakfast would not allow our young children to thrive, fulfil their potential, and it could limit future opportunities for them. I'm really worried that Scottish children and young people are going to be left behind their peers in England. In Scotland, we're seeing poverty on a much wider scale than ever before. When I visit schools, we're seeing a rapid rise of food banks to support families in the community. Families are really struggling with the cost of living, and the families that were managing before just aren't doing so anymore. We're seeing an increase in food insecurity. Teaching staff are reporting higher numbers than ever of young people entering school each morning, not ready to learn because of the effects of hunger. It really saddens me to hear that children are not even recognising the signs of hunger in themselves, and pains in their tummy and headaches have now become the norm, which I'm sure you'll agree is just heartbreaking. Teaching staff are doing their best to address hunger. They're buying food themselves. They're offering biscuits and cereal bars within the classrooms to just try and get their young people through the day. Teachers have told me that they see students slumped over their desk, lacking in energy, they're lethargic, exhausted, and unable to engage in lessons. A PE teacher told me the other day that there's been occasions where children haven't been able to have enough energy to take part in PE classes. We hear that young people are using their free school meal allocation for lunch to buy breakfast, which means that they are then unable to eat for the rest of the day. that hot school lunch might be the only meal that that young person receives, or the only hot meal they'll receive. Our teaching staff are really keen in our schools to open school early in the morning, get children in on time and get them fed, because they are aware that many young people are waking up in cold homes, sometimes getting themselves up and out in the morning and not having anything in the cupboard to eat. A mum I spoke to at an Edinburgh school recently told me about how she's skipping meals to make sure that she's able to provide for her children. She shared with me that that's causing heightened anxiety in her young children, and there's only so many times she can tell them that she's on a diet, and that's why she's not eating. In a South Lanarkshire school recently that I visited, breakfast was being offered within the library. They have a number of new Scots entering the country without recourse to public funds. Their parents are students studying at universities in Scotland. They pop into breakfast every morning in the library to have a nutritious meal. Without this provision, they would simply go hungry. Failure from the government to roll out free breakfast would have a devastating effect on families such as these. Please can I have slide 3? I'd like to move on to some really positive news now about a recent school who have joined Magic Breakfast, Falkirk High. Falkirk High is set in a community with high levels of deprivation and increasing challenges associated with rising living costs, which have had a big effect on their families. School has a 59% SMID, which is how we measure deprivation in Scotland. This is a tool used by the Scottish Government, and it means social index of multiple deprivation. Some of our schools are actually nearly at 100% SMID, but this particular school has rolled out a universal breakfast, which is a joy to see. I visited them a couple of weeks ago. We've been working with the canteen staff to implement breakfast, and they've also put breakfast across the whole school so that no students and pupils are missing out in the morning. The canteen in the morning is an absolute bustling hub. There was a queue snaking round to go and collect their breakfast in the morning. Young people can enjoy cereals, porridge, beans on toast. There's fresh fruit to choose from. It's just absolutely incredible. But even more than just food, it's a safe, warm, nurturing space where teaching staff can check in with their young people in the morning before the school day starts. I'm delighted to report that there's approximately 200 young people benefiting daily from breakfast at Falkirk High. There's no visible stigma. Everyone is treated with equity across the school. The school staff are fully committed to ending morning hunger as a barrier for learning. Can I have the next slide, please? I'd like to share with you this very short case study that Falkirk High have given to us for today. It's based upon just one single child in many great examples that school had that breakfast is making a real difference to. As you can see, this child in S4, which is the same as 4th year in the English schools, has got a significant additional support needs. Also, that runs in the family. He was accessing a bespoke curriculum and the family were living in poverty. Prior to the implementation of Magic Breakfast, this child wouldn't have had breakfast or might have had something unsuitable on the bus into school in the morning. I am delighted to tell you he is now having breakfast every day within the social area, which is impacting positively on his social skills as well and building his confidence. He's loving the bagels, he's loving the porridge, which he had never tried before, and teaching staff have shared with us that he's more settled before classes begin, his concentration and behaviour has improved, and it's having a positive effect on his learning. This one example really shows how transformational breakfast can be for our children and young people. It really does make a difference. And I am so very proud that all of us here today play a small part in that. We might all take a warm home and food on the table for granted, but sadly, it's not a given for every child. Schools really need Magic Breakfast support to bring about lasting change and provide a better future for their children and young people so that they are ready to learn and being able to fulfil their aspirations. There's some lovely quotes there that you can see from the teachers and pupils, but this is just one example in many and just a little snapshot of the fantastic work that's happening within our Scottish schools. Thank you so much. I'll pass back to Lindsay now.
Thank you so much, Jill, for bringing those stories and experiences to life. I think that's such a warming and wonderful and positive way to start our morning today. I am delighted to now introduce two incredibly inspiring people because they work in one of Magic Breakfast's partner schools, Anthony Blake and Jill Dodds, and they are the assistant head teacher and head teacher of one of our partner schools. So I'll hand over to you and look forward to hearing about the realities of policy and Magic Breakfast provision on the ground.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Jill Dodd, head teacher here at Sandhillview Academy.
And I'm Anthony Blake, assistant head teacher.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So we're a secondary school in Sunderland, and it has just over 770 students in our academy. The IDAI, which is the English Indices of Deprivation Affecting Children's Index, ranks Sunderland in the top 10% for deprivation levels nationally. Now, we serve a community, as you can see by some of the pictures there, which compromises of 5 council estates, and this particular area in Sunderland is ranked 2 in Sunderland for levels of deprivation, and that's according to data from the Office of National Statistics. Our disadvantaged cohort represents over 50% of our population. It's currently sitting at 52%, and that also puts us into the highest 20% of schools in the country in terms of disadvantaged. We also have a lot of our children who come to us with adverse childhood experiences, which is known as ACEs, and the main ACEs for Sandhillview Academy are neglect and domestic violence. In addition to that, we have a large population of students with a special educational need. We have almost a third that require additional support, and 22 of our children have an educational healthcare plan, which is just above national. We've worked with Magic Breakfast for a number of years, and they supported us in feeding our most vulnerable and disadvantaged students. Our original offer, which was pre-COVID, that ran as a breakfast club from 8 till 8:30 alongside a grab and go offer. What we found though was that this just wasn't enough, and it didn't matter how much we provided our children, it still wasn't enough. This was made even more apparent in 2017 when the government introduced the child cap, which limits universal credit and child tax credit, to 2 children per family. The Institute of Fiscal Studies reports this cap impacted the poorest 40%, which is a huge percentage of our families, and it impacted them by 10% of their income. So for some families, it was up to £4,000 a year. For our families, there became a really difficult choice of food or heating, and then COVID hit.
Next slide, please. So COVID was a particularly difficult time for a lot of our parents. We had staff doing welfare checks on the students and found that the parents were in despair as money was extremely tight, tighter than ever been. So every Wednesday we opened our doors and we had food donations from most deprived students. One parent actually came to collect some cereal and bread for their child, so they only had 1 child in school, and explained how they actually had 5 younger siblings in some of our feeder primary schools and were struggling to make ends meet. So obviously we then decided to provide food for all 6 children. It became clear just how much our parents really relied on the breakfast the children received when we were open, and obviously we weren't open, so they weren't fully getting it. So in September 2020, when we reopened our doors, we realised we really need to increase our offer to our students. But the biggest challenge was actually time. How would have time to provide breakfast in such a large number to all of our students to really make a difference? So alongside this challenge that the country was facing under lockdown, we had then Christmas fast approaching. So as you're talking day to day with students, we asked one student, are they looking forward to Christmas? As like a bit of banter, are they looking forward to Christmas? And he said no, he wasn't looking forward to Christmas. Which is really weird. It's a child right before Christmas. And what do you mean? He goes, oh, it's not my turn. So we asked, what do you mean it's not your turn? He goes, oh, I've got 3 brothers. We don't have Christmas every year. We have to take turns. And that really put in light how poor some of our students were. It was a single mom. She just could not afford it. So to aid the families over the Christmas period, we worked with a local charity who provided gifts for most deprived students, a bit like a shoebox appeal. So that year we provided gifts for over 200 students. In addition to this, staff actually, along with ASDA, donated food, and we actually had hampers. The real good thing about the Christmas presents was when the kids were at school, our staff went out with the families and gave them the presents, so the kids would never realise that it was coming from the school, so they thought the gifts were coming from their parents. So it became apparent it wasn't just our disadvantaged students as well that really relied on the breakfast offer. We had loads of parents who actually worked, but they were barely making enough money to cover the heating costs and the food costs.
So once the second lockdown kind of and everyone arrived back at school, we all sat down as a leadership team to look at that big barrier that was to feeding all of our students, which was time. And we decided to make a really bold decision to change the school day by reducing lessons by 5 minutes each and increasing our morning tutor time to 30 minutes. We did a lot of consultation with our staff regarding the impact it would have on lessons. Obviously, their schemes of learning and their planning were designed for 60-minute lessons, but actually we found that by refining some of our routines, such as handing books out, collecting them in, equipment bags, etc., we would be able to refine those strategies so it wouldn't have an impact on learning at all. This would allow us to feed all of Key Stage 3 students, and so Family Breakfast was born at Sandhill View Academy. The idea is that every year group would come down to the dining hall with their tutors and tutor, and students would all sit down together at a table and enjoy breakfast together. It would allow us to perform informal welfare checks on the students to ensure they were all fed, ready for the day ahead. Our next barrier was, of course, the cost in supplementing the Magic Breakfast to feed over 750 students. I did make the decision that this was a priority, would need to find the budget for it, so we had to make cuts elsewhere. The final biggest barrier was staffing. I created a job role which was for leader of Family Breakfast, and they are responsible for the ordering of the additional breakfast supplies on top of the allocation from Magic Breakfast, and they also coordinate the morning with another member of staff whose hours I increased to encompass the Family Breakfast. So this means that they're able to come in for work at 7:30 a.m. each morning with 1 hour to prepare breakfasts. Initially, once I'd kind of spoke to the 2 staff about that vision, there was a conversation about toasters and how practical it was going to be to toast all of this bread. So we bought in an industrial sized toaster, and in September 2021 we launched Family Breakfast. Next slide, please. So there were a few teething issues, such as logistics of pouring cereal. Who knew? So now we have that already poured and ready for the students as they come in. But it was launched with a huge success, as you can see by the pictures there. The top middle is one of the tutors who is going around and offering the students their breakfast. Bottom right, one of our members of staff religiously has her breakfast purposefully with the children to reduce the stigma of it. And the bottom left is me taking part in something called Brilliant Breakfast. So there were a few teething issues, such as the logistics, but It was launched with a huge success. Bridget Phillipson even came to visit when it was first opened to see how we run it, and was suitably impressed in how we managed to feed so many children. We've had further expansion since the launch. So despite feeding everyone during tutor time and break time, we were still finding that we ran short. So we've invested in another industrial size toaster and another member of staff. So we now have 3 members of staff and 2 industrial size toasters. And we could probably still make more, but we've reached capacity for now. In terms of feedback from the students, some commented how they love having something warm to eat on a morning, particularly in the winter months. Some have asked for juice and water to supplement that. So you'll notice in the top left-hand side, we've supplied all of students with water bottles, and we provide juice and water every morning so they can fill up their water bottles for the day ahead. One tutor, after having a chat with a student about their house being in darkness, so this welfare check, that had a conversation with a student about their house being in darkness the night before, and it highlighted how mum had been unable to afford electricity until payday. So we were able to get in contact and help out, topping up their electricity. In addition to family breakfast, we also run, like I mentioned, Brilliant Breakfast, which is highlighted in the bottom left-hand corner there. And we use that as a reward system for students who've had 0 negative points using our behaviour system, which is class charts. So the children come in and have breakfast with SLT, and there they can enjoy some hot chocolate. There's some additional pastries we put on, and the bacon sandwiches, which also always go down well with the students. It's extremely popular, and over the first year we did see a 2 percentage point rise in attendance on Friday, which was traditionally our worst day of attendance. We've also seen a decrease in our negative points across the academy because students are more settled in their lessons, they're engaged and they're on task. We have topics of conversation now during breakfast, which has shown an improvement in their oracy skills from some of our students. And this year we're rolling that out into family breakfast to expose more of our students to the structured talk in a social environment. For our more vulnerable students, particularly our students with a special educational need, this has been incredibly successful because they love the routine of that first half an hour in school, knowing they're going to be fed, and it allows us to check in with that group of students just to ensure we pick up on anything that might have gone wrong that morning for them. Feedback from staff's really been positive. So I gather feedback from staff using a staff pulse. It's like a survey, an anonymous survey every 2 weeks. And there's been a small number of teachers who've commented how grateful they are for the free breakfast this every morning because it helps their monthly bills. So we currently run a mixed model where we have our original breakfast club, which is available from 8 till 8:30 before school. It just gets the students in off the yard somewhere warm. We run breakfast clubs in our student support base and our bridge, which are provisions for our most vulnerable students. And we also have family breakfast, which we run in the dining hall, which allows a full year group at a time to have breakfast with their tutors. We also have grab and go at break time and also for our late arrivals.
I think it's pertinent to point out, even though we have all that and the cook and toast from 7:30 in the morning for a full hour, every single bit of toast or bagel goes.
All of it
goes every single morning.
We could easily make more, couldn't we? The latest announcement from the government, which is offering free breakfast for primary schools, is obviously disappointing because we know how important it is for our school and how successful it's been since we launched our inclusive breakfast for all. It's no coincidence that we've also just celebrated the Academy's best GCSE results so far. And we'll continue with our breakfast offer for as long as we're able to, funds allowing. I'm really passionate about funding being spent on improving the lives and outcomes of our children, and providing breakfast is an integral part of this. We'd just like to say a massive thank you to Magic Breakfast and their partners. Because of your generosity, we're able to feed our children every morning, providing them with a nutritional breakfast to start the day. This gives us the opportunity to check in with our children from a welfare point of view. It allows us to build on their oracy skills through structured talk, and it also provides our children with fuel to focus their minds for the day ahead. Without you, we wouldn't be able to provide this for our children. So it's a huge thanks from both of us and our community. Thank you very much.
I'll pass back to Lorraine. Lindsay.
Well, I think I speak on behalf of everyone that actually the thanks is very much directed to you, Anthony and Jill, and your colleagues at Sandhill View. I mean, all I could think while you were speaking is, one, I wish every child got to go to a school like Sandhill View Academy and, you know, had the passion and the compassion that you've shown, not just, you know, this morning, every single day, but also going back to the really challenging time of the pandemic and lockdown. And I know, and we often hear when visiting partner schools, the reality and the implications of COVID are very much still being felt and will be for years to come in terms of the impact that had on children and young people. So thank you. One of the things we've been highlighting during the party conferences and really trying to draw attention to is the fact that not every school, you know, for various reasons, is a Sandhill View in terms of that engagement, or, you know, the school that Jill spoke to us about in Falkirk. One of the things we absolutely recognise is that this new policy is mandating, it's requiring schools to provide school breakfast. And whereas all of the schools working with Magic Breakfast very much opt in, they ask if they can be part of Magic Breakfast. This is going to see schools, head teachers, school leaders who maybe don't quite fully understand or yet appreciate the value and the potential benefits of breakfast, or how to ensure that the children and young people who need it most really benefit and get to access that in a barrier and stigma-free way. So that is another reason, a key reason why, as Lorraine highlighted, we're advocating for that expert advice and support to be provided, especially during the crucial early years of the new policy being rolled out. So thank you, everyone. Thank you to all of our speakers, and thank you for those of you who have already started to submit questions into the Q&A. I'm going to ask that we bring all of our speakers back on screen, please. If you can turn your cameras on. That will be wonderful. And I will bring each of you into the different questions. I'm going to start with you, Lorraine, if that's all right. One of the questions that's come in is, do we understand why special schools, or at least why primary age children in them, have not been included in the policy commitment in the Children's Wellbeing Bill? Is it something about the practicalities of excluding secondary age children, or is it a mistaken omission? Are you able to share any insight on this issue?
I am, yes. So our understanding so far, and what the discussions we've been having with different kind of decision makers, is that there's two possibilities. One is that it's just the way that it's framed, and it's just the way that the language that the government and the party uses, and it will actually encompass children with SEND who are primary aged. That's one option, and we have been reassured that that is the most likely option. So if that's the case, that's obviously positive, and it means that all children with SEND of a primary age will be included, but we need that confirmed. So the first point, I guess, to make from Magic Breakfast's point of view is, until we see this in writing, or until we see a politician or senior decision maker say this, we have to keep advocating for it, because as we've discussed and as we've shared here today, is particularly in examples in Scotland, words can be empty until we see the reality of them and them coming into action. So that's one option, but we need to keep the pressure on in case that isn't the case. Even if that is what happens, children with SEND who are secondary aged are not included in this, and we've had no conversations that allude to the possibility that they will be included in this. So as we also said in our conversations here and our discussions, children with SEND are experience some of the highest levels of disadvantage in the country, no matter what age they're at. So even if it does extend to children who are primary aged with SEND, we need to keep pushing and keep advocating for it to include all children with SEND up till all ages and across both countries. So I hope that answers your question. It probably doesn't give clarity, but it tells you where we're at right now and the answers that we are still seeking, and the pressure we're still putting on to get those answers confirmed.
Thanks, Lorraine. And as you say, I think one of the key things to recognise is that this is happening very much at pace. And one of the things that we're trying to ensure is that while civil servants and ministers are moving at pace and looking to deliver and implement the policy, that's not to the detriment of its effectiveness or its impact on children, young people and communities. I have a few questions, unsurprisingly, for Anthony and Jill. So if it's all right, I'm going to come to you both for a moment or two. To start things off, is there a positive moment or memory in particular that you'd like to share that stands out to you from your family breakfasts?
I think for me, the brilliant breakfast on a Friday where we get to kind of sit with the children, and it's that little bit, it's that little extra special bit where we can give them hot chocolate and where we can give them the bacon sandwiches, and we always have topics of the week. And we'd asked one of the children what they thought of the family breakfast and what they thought of the brilliant breakfast, and he commented how he'd never ever had hot chocolate and a bacon sandwich for breakfast, and he thought our hot chocolate was the best hot chocolate he'd ever tasted, and he was just so innocent about it, and when he said it, it was kind of because I was fortunate enough as a child to have a lovely breakfast on a morning with my family, and realizing that not all children was kind of a stark introduction to teaching for me when I first began. But I think now it's that the innocence from them, and that was really, really heartwarming, and they just love being with their tutor on a morning and having that adult, that adult who cares. Yeah.
Please, do you want to add one in as well?
I'm just going to add that when we say family breakfast, it's because it's a family. So like Jill said, a lot of the kids don't have that. They don't. A lot of them don't even have tables with me at the house. They don't have tables to sit down at. They don't sit down. It's hard to say, but some of the parents, they don't get up with the students. They don't feed them on a morning. So when we first started doing it, we sat them down, and for a lot of students, it was an absolute foreign concept to sit down with other people and eat and be social. And we wanted the family breakfast to be like a family. So we bought nice jugs and we had little baskets for stuff, and we wanted to look very, very homely. And it was when we first started, and it was the concept of getting the kids used to that, sitting down and talking and eating and being communal like a family. And it was nice to just kind of see the growing and the kind of the joy in the students' faces when they do that, and they sat down with the tutor and they say, "Oh no, how was your weekend?" And why is they all eating toast and cereal? And then the conversation began, because you don't get that kind of chat sat in a tutor room when you're at the front with your kids. You don't get that, but you do sat around a table. And it was that for me when it first started. And I see I'm there every single morning. I see it every single morning.
And it's a lovely, lovely atmosphere. Really nice.
Oh, thank you. And that actually takes us really nicely into my next question, which you can stay off mute because I'm coming back to you. For the head teacher and deputy head, the work you do in such a deprived area is amazing. The Christmas hamper story in particular is so sad yet heartwarming. Thank you for being there for your students. The question is, and this is actually really timely because there's a report that's come out actually today from our friends at the Food Foundation highlighting the coexistence of food insecurity and hunger with a detrimental impact on mental health. And so the question is, how would you say breakfast and other elements of the school day supports students' learning, but also their well-being and mental health?
I think, food's one of the basics, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So for students to be fed is a basic need. And COVID for us highlighted just how many of our children weren't being fed. So like I mentioned when we were speaking, for us, we've seen a decline in negative behaviours in and around our classrooms. Our children are much more settled, they're much more focused after being fed on a morning. They can go back and be fed on a break time, so it resettles them for that after break. So now we have pockets of the day where we're continually refueling the children, if you like. So we're feeding them on a morning when they come in. They have a couple of lessons, they're being fed again. They have a couple of lessons, they're being fed again, and then they're getting a couple more lessons. So what we're finding is it's having a really nice, a really positive impact on the classroom environment, because they're then able to concentrate better because they're not hungry. They've had something warm, and it's filled them And as I mentioned as well, their structured talk, their ability to articulate now, and Anthony touched on that when we first launched it, to sit around a table and have meaningful conversations with your family was alien to a lot of our children. So that's enabled us to kind of develop their structured talk in social environments, and be able to talk to each other, and ask. So you know, on corridors throughout the day, if we see our children, it's good morning, miss. Are you all right, miss? If it's on an afternoon, are you okay, miss? Did you have anything nice for lunch? Because we're teaching that all of the time whilst we're having that breakfast and whilst we're having that social element. It also importantly enables us to check in with them from a welfare point of view. So where did they watch TV? Tells us whether or not they've had electricity, were they warm, what are they finding with the cold months, and we kind of train our staff to kind of softly test the welfare of our children on a morning.
I think on the back of that, like you said, it's like a safe space. If
Yeah.
you make a welcome and warm environment for the students, like we've touched upon again, their home lives aren't great, and a lot of them are completely masky. You'll never know, but they don't have a great home life. You don't know that the police are at their door late at night. You don't know that their mum's partner might have beaten them up. You don't know what's going on. They have no electricity, no heating, no tea. And having that, not just the breakfast, all the things we provide in school, we try to make it's a community. It's your village.
It's a village.
It's a village. And all the little things do. It could be a club we offer, it could be the water bottles, the water, the breakfast, the lunch. Whatever we offer, the whole point is to make the school a warm, welcoming environment where they come and feel safe, to escape sometimes from the hardships they have when they leave the building.
Yeah.
And it's nice to provide that safe space.
You know, we provide uniform. So if they don't have the correct uniform, we just buy it for them.
Subsidise all the trips.
We subsidise trips. We give them equipment every single morning. I mean, that's some...
Yeah.
But we do it because that's what they need. So we try and give our children everything that they need to succeed, you know, so that they can then start building their self-esteem and having that self-actualization that they can succeed, you know. I am from this community. I am the disadvantaged child. My dad was brought up in the estate that surrounds this school, and I've achieved what I've achieved, you know, and it's kind of highlighting our children that there is no ceiling on success.
Oh, thank you both so much. That's just heartwarming and brilliant to hear. Thank you. And there were several questions about kind of different, I suppose, impact and benefits of breakfast that I thought I'd just quickly touch on. So in terms of the academic, the evidence for academic impact, as you know, has already been referenced, that kind of improvement in attendance, the improvement in classroom behavior, all of that leads and, you know, enables what we found to be an increase in attainment, and also in GCSE results when you look specifically at the exam period in secondary schools. And that's, you know, not only Magic Breakfast and kind of our annual surveying of teachers and partner schools, it's the work that we've done with external partners, the Education Endowment Foundation, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, University of Leeds, who have demonstrated that impact of the Magic Breakfast model and the importance of that breakfast provision. I'm going to ask now, Jill, I'll be coming to you about secondaries, because one of the questions that has been asked is Magic Breakfast planning to work more with secondary schools? And so I suppose just as an organisation, we absolutely are. One of the things that we are highlighting and championing as well is the fact that there are, as Lorraine mentioned, many hundreds of secondary schools currently receiving breakfast support through the National School Breakfast Programme. And we also know that hunger doesn't end at 11. So we continue to push to ensure that children and young people of all ages, in all school settings, in all parts of the UK, don't have hunger as a barrier to learning. But Jill, is there anything you'd like to share in terms of, I suppose, one, how do you, and are you looking to work with more secondary schools in Scotland? And also, how do you work with secondary schools and with schools in particular, I suppose, especially at the beginning of that journey, to help them remove stigma and to introduce, a stigma barrier-free breakfast provision?
Thank you, Lindsay. Yeah, we are definitely looking to work with more secondary schools in Scotland. We have a great number of secondaries, actually. And in the last year, we've had a lot of referrals from secondary schools who have launched with Magic Breakfast and had great success, and have then spoken to other schools within their clusters. They've buddied up with each other to go and look at a particular model in a school and just loved it and wanted to come on board and have sent in an expression of interest to work with Magic Breakfast. So I think secondary schools is definitely an area of interest to us. And, we recognise that there's so many young people in secondary who are not eating breakfast for various reasons in the morning. It might be that they have no food at home. It might be, typical teenagers, as my sons were, rushed in the morning, spending time doing their makeup or their hair, or just really wanting that extra, 20 minutes in bed in the morning. So definitely in secondary schools, they are a big target. And also the eating of unhealthy foods in secondary schools in the morning, with a culture of young people who are walking by the local shops in the morning or a Greggs and finding a sugary snack or an energy drink. It's a real, epidemic in secondary schools. So if we are able to support more secondary schools, we can allow those young people to make healthier choices. And that's where our community engagement work will come in this year, going into schools, talking to young people, talking to communities to instill those good breakfast habits and get them into school early to have a Magic Breakfast. So in terms of stigma, when we work with schools or our engagement partners, work with schools to set up breakfast, we encourage schools to have a universal approach to hunger. That can look different in a number of schools. Some schools choose to have a breakfast club where they would target and identify those most vulnerable students to come in and have breakfast in the morning, maybe the young people that need a bit more nurture. But then they would always have an extended reach model bolted onto that, whether it's, a table in the main foyer with bakery goods on it so everyone can have breakfast, or we have young people as breakfast ambassadors handing out breakfast on the playground. There's lots of different models. So I think if a school is offering breakfast for all, and there can't be any visible stigma at all, because it's a joy to get into school and not be able to, highlight a target pupil. We shouldn't know who the target pupils are. Everyone should be treated with equity and still able to have a breakfast every morning. And I think location is also key, making sure it's in a space where it's visible to everyone, staff modelling good breakfast habits, eating alongside the children, as Anthony and Jill mentioned before, and really building that community feel around breakfast so that we don't have the stigma of young children, and young people in secondaries sneaking off to a little room in, the back of Beyond in the morning to seek out a breakfast. Everyone, it's very open, very visible, and that really helps to reduce any issues with stigma. Thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you so much, Jill. Thank you. I'm conscious we've got so many questions, and I apologise that we haven't been able to get to every one of them. So for those who I haven't been able to pick up, we will endeavour as a team to connect with you directly. But I am going to, because I've got just enough time, I think, to ask Lorraine for your top tip. One of the questions is success, what are your top tips for influencing government policy? So can you give us your number one top tip for influencing government policy?
I mean, I've written 3, which we don't have time for, so I need to pick the correct one. Oh, crikey, I'm going to combine 2. Anything that we're asking decision makers to do, we have to be able to back up. Okay, we need research, we need evidence, and we need to be able to say why this is going to work. People need convinced, and it can't just be because all of us in this room right now, our virtual room, are passionate and care about it. It has to be backed up. So when we get that, we need to compile it over months and years and then present it in the most compelling way to the correct people. You have to know who you're aiming for and who you're targeting at. And to put that in a bigger bubble, it's really important for us to be open and warm and listen to the people we're trying to talk to, whether it's in our own kind of sector group, whether it's the government, whether it's politicians, because some people already stand for what we stand for and want to go forward with this and work with this. And other people need convincing, and that's okay because they've got other priorities. That's okay. But we need to listen, we need to be open, and we need to come at it from a place that everybody can meet in the middle and understand what we're doing with convincing, compelling arguments, and then continue at it constantly, tirelessly, endlessly, and don't take no for an answer, because when it's an important issue like this, we've just got to keep going, and we've got to keep doing it till every child and young person is reached.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. And what I loved about that answer actually is how many of our values you cited just in giving that response. I don't know if that was intentional or just by coincidence. So I will thank everyone for attending this morning's Magic Morning. Particular thanks to our speakers, Lorraine, Jill, Anthony and Jill. Thank you so much as well for everything you do at Sandhill View, and for the really inspiring start to our day, and also the inspiring idea of what can be achieved by rolling out a national universal stigma barrier-free breakfast provision in every school in the UK. We will all collectively, I know, keep fighting together, standing up for children and young people to make that a reality someday. Thank you to everyone who has joined. Please do fill in the survey feedback when it's completed, and we look forward to having you join our next Magic Morning in due course. So thank you and have a wonderful rest of the day.